Picture your grandmother's kitchen for a second. No island the size of a small country. No smart fridge pinging you about expired yogurt. No app telling you the coffee maker finished brewing. Just a room built by people who actually thought about how a human being moves through a day of cooking, cleaning, and feeding a family. Somewhere between then and now, we traded genuinely clever design for granite islands and matching stainless steel everything. And along the way, we quietly lost dozens of features that made kitchens smarter, not just shinier on Instagram. Today, we're counting down 20 vintage kitchen features that deserve a serious comeback, and a few of them are already sneaking back into high-end renovations without anyone admitting where the idea actually came from. Some of these solved problems with pure physics, no electricity required. Some solved problems we've simply stopped noticing because we've never lived with the alternative. And one or two are proof that the fanciest, most expensive modern remodel is often just quietly reinventing something a builder in 1925 already got right the first time. Stick around for number one, because it's a feature so simple and so obviously useful that you'll wonder why builders ever stopped including it in the first place. Let's get into it. 20. Plate racks. Before dish drainers became a permanent countertop eyesore, plate racks handled the job by being built directly into the cabinetry itself. Common from the 1920s through the 1950s, these were open, vertically slotted shelves usually installed right above or beside the sink, so freshly washed plates could air dry in place instead of dripping all over a towel or plastic rack nobody wants to look at. The real genius of the plate rack was that it doubled as storage and display at the same time. Instead of hiding your dishware behind solid cabinet doors, plate racks let your everyday china become part of the room's personality, a small, constant show and tell of family history, passed down patterns, and whatever set you picked up on your honeymoon. Interior designers chasing the modern farmhouse look have already figured this out again, which is why open plate racks are quietly reappearing in kitchen renovations that want charm without ripping out the entire cabinet run. Freestanding wire versions exist for renters who can't touch the built-ins, but the recessed cabinetry integrated version still looks the most intentional. 19. Drainboard sinks. If plate racks solved dish storage, the drainboard sink solved the drying problem right at the source. Popular from the 1920s into the 1950s, these were single cast iron units finished in a thick layer of porcelain enamel sink basin, countertop surface, and a grooved, gently sloped drainboard all cast as one seamless piece, so water from wet dishes ran straight back into the basin instead of pooling on the counter. What's genuinely remarkable is their durability. Original drainboard sinks are still functioning in houses today, 70, 80, sometimes closer to 100 years after installation, often with barely a scratch on the porcelain. That kind of longevity is basically unheard of in modern kitchen fixtures, most of which are engineered to look good for a decade and then get swapped out. High-end designers have started cutting drainage grooves directly into quartzite and marble counters now, which, if you squint, is really just the drainboard sink reborn in far more expensive stone. 18. Tin-lined bread and produce drawers. Long before anyone worried about food waste. As a talking point, kitchens from the 1920s to the 1950s were built with drawers designed around how specific foods actually spoil. Bread drawers were tin-lined with small vents, which kept insects out while letting just enough air circulate to stop mold without drying the loaf out too quickly. Produce drawers went even further, using perforated metal or mesh bottoms for root vegetables that needed to stay dry, sometimes with a light-blocking, tin-lined section for potatoes so they wouldn't turn green, and a separate vented compartment just for onions. It's a level of food-specific engineering that a plastic bread bag and an open counter bowl simply can't match. A handful of custom kitchen builders are starting to bring these ventilated drawers back into luxury remodels for exactly that reason, proving that a 100-year-old idea about airflow still beats most of what's on the market today. 17. Pot filler. Faucets. The wall-mounted faucet positioned directly over the stove first showed up in upscale homes between the 1920s and the 1970s, and its purpose was blunt and practical. Nobody wants to carry a heavy, sloshing pot of water across a kitchen floor. A double-jointed, articulating arm let it swing out and reach any burner on the cooktop, then fold flat back against the wall when it wasn't needed, with shutoff valves at both the wall and the spout to prevent leaks. It's one of those features that sounds like an unnecessary luxury, right up until you've cooked a big batch of pasta, stock, or soup without one, hauling pot after pot from the sink. Today, it's back in a serious way in custom kitchens, usually finished in polished brass or chrome to match the rest of the hardware, functioning as both a genuine workhorse and a deliberate design statement mounted above the range. 16. Warming drawers. Anyone who's ever juggled multiple dishes trying to hit the table at the same temperature will appreciate exactly what the warming drawer was built to solve. Common in upscale homes from the 1960s onward, it holds cooked food at a gentle, precisely controlled serving temperature without continuing to cook it further. And better models added humidity control so nothing dried out on one side or went soggy on the other while it waited its turn. Beyond simply keeping the mashed potatoes warm, cooks use these drawers to proof bread dough overnight, warm plates before a formal dinner service, or hold side dishes ready while the main course finished on the stove. For anyone who hosts regularly or juggles a big holiday meal, it's hard to overstate how much timing-related stress a single warming drawer removes from the whole evening. 15. Bread boxes. The countertop bread box, with its familiar curved roll-top lid, was a fixture in kitchens for generations, built from painted wood, enameled metal, or glazed ceramic depending on the era and the budget. Its job was more scientific than it looks on the surface. Strategically placed vents let just enough air move through the box to prevent mold growth, while still keeping the loaf dark and shielded from drying out too fast in open air. Compared to a sealed plastic bag, a good bread box actually manages humidity rather than trapping it, which is exactly why crusty, artisan-style loaves stay fresher and keep their crackling crust for longer inside one. It's a small, genuinely inexpensive item to bring back, and unlike most of the features on this list, it's one you can buy and start using this afternoon without touching a single wall or cabinet. 14. Hoosier cabinets. Before built-in cabinetry was standard in American homes, the freestanding Hoosier cabinet was the true workhorse of the kitchen. The style traces back to Indiana manufacturers in the late 1890s, with the Hoosier Manufacturing Company of Newcastle, Indiana, becoming the dominant name in the market after 1900. By the early decades of the 1900s, more than 250,000 of these cabinets were being manufactured every single year to keep up with demand. A single cabinet, usually standing around 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, packed in a hand-crank flour sifter, sugar bins, a pull-out work table for rolling dough, tin-lined drawers for bread storage, hooks for hanging utensils, and even printed recipe cards tucked inside the cabinet doors. It was essentially an entire baking station compressed into a single piece of furniture decades before anyone used the phrase multifunctional design. Original units in restorable condition now sell anywhere from around $400 to $2,000 at antique dealers, and plenty of people are restoring them into dedicated coffee bars or baking stations, rather than letting all that clever engineering sit unused in a garage. 13. Pull-out pantry drawers. Custom kitchens of the 1980s and early 1990s introduced deep, full-extension pantry drawers as a direct answer to the oldest problem in food storage. Whatever gets pushed to the back of a fixed shelf gets forgotten until it expires. Pulling the entire drawer forward on heavy-duty sliders puts every single item in view at once, instead of leaving half the pantry a mystery. The smartest versions varied the drawer height across the run, shallow drawers up top-sized for spice jars and small cans, deeper drawers below, built for cereal boxes and bulk packages. It's a fairly small shift in the geometry of storage, but it meaningfully cuts down on wasted groceries, and it remains one of the easier vintage ideas to retrofit into a current kitchen remodel without a full layout change. 12. Larder cupboards. For homes, without the square footage for a full walk-in pantry, the standalone larder cupboard offered a graceful alternative, a large closed cabinet that consolidated all the dry goods, canned items, and staple ingredients into one dedicated space, instead of scattering them piecemeal across the kitchen in whatever cabinet happened to be free. Larders were especially common in farmhouse-style homes, where the cupboard itself often became something of an architectural statement. Designers today are treating the larder as a genuine furniture piece rather than a plain utility closet, often finishing it in a bold, contrasting color while keeping the rest of the kitchen neutral, then pairing it with warm brass or unlacquered hardware for depth. Done well, it adds real personality to a room without the visual noise of color everywhere. 11. Breakfast nooks. Built-in breakfast nooks took off in the 1920s and 1930s as a clever way to fit real dining space into a smaller footprint. Fixed bench seating, or banquettes, used noticeably less floor space than a traditional table and chair setup, since nobody needs a few extra feet of clearance to pull a chair back from a bench that's already against the wall. Nooks were usually tucked near a window to catch the morning light, which turned an ordinary breakfast into something a little more pleasant. More than the space savings, breakfast nooks created a built-in reason to actually sit down together instead of eating standing up at the counter or scattering to separate rooms. Modern versions have upgraded the format with hidden storage under the bench cushions for toys or linens, and the occasional USB outlet or reading lamp. But the core idea, a cozy, semi-enclosed corner just for meals, is exactly what's driving their return as fully open floor plans start to fall slightly out of favor. 10. Stove alcoves. When wood-burning and cast-iron stoves became standard through the 19th and early 20th centuries, builders often set the stove into a recessed niche lined with brick, ceramic tile, or sheet metal. That alcove protected the surrounding walls from both heat damage and fire risk, while also helping retain warmth during cooking and catching grease splatter before it hit the rest of the room's finish. Today, a flush-mounted range can disappear into a wall of matching stainless steel appliances with essentially zero visual presence of its own. Designers bringing back the stove alcove are using it to create an actual focal point in the kitchen again, often adding dedicated lighting, a pot filler faucet, or small built-in shelves for spices and oils right into the recess itself. 9. Insulated retained heat stoves. Brands like Chambers and O'Keefe and Merit represent a completely different philosophy of cooking than anything sold today. The Chambers Corporation, founded in Shelbyville, Indiana in 1912 by John Chambers, built ranges wrapped in thick rock wool insulation, dense enough that the oven could be brought up to a high temperature, shut off completely, and finish cooking the food entirely on residual heat, a signature system Chambers marketed as the ThermoWell. That wasn't a gimmick. Entire cookbooks were written around timing meals to this retained heat method, since a roast could go in hot for as little as 20 minutes and then finish over another hour or more with the gas switched off the whole time. O'Keefe and Merit ranges from the same golden era carried their own signature touches, including side-by-side double ovens and, on some models, built-in salt and pepper grinders mounted right into the cooktop surface. These stoves were engineered to outlast their original owners entirely, and restored units from either brand still command thousands of dollars from collectors who trust 70-year-old cast iron over anything currently rolling off a factory line. There's a small but devoted community of restorers today who source parts, re-porcelain the exteriors, and get these stoves running again for kitchens that want genuine vintage cooking performance rather than just a retro-styled shell. 8. Colorful appliances. After decades of stainless steel dominating every single kitchen photo, color is quietly making a comeback. In the 1950s, refrigerators and ranges came in soft pastels, pink, mint green, butter yellow, powder blue, with rounded edges and gleaming chrome details that made them look more like furniture than equipment stuffed into a room. That warmth is exactly what a lot of homeowners are chasing again, deliberately swapping cold, uniform stainless steel for pastel or deep saturated appliances that give the kitchen an actual personality instead of matching every other rental listing on the block. Leaving appliances exposed rather than hidden behind matching panels also makes them easier and cheaper to swap out down the line, which is a practical bonus on top of the aesthetic one. 7. Butcher block countertops. From the late 1800s through the 1960s, hard maple, oak, or walnut butcher block was the standard countertop in kitchens built around serious, everyday cooking. Unlike granite or engineered stone, wood is far more forgiving on knife edges, and it carries natural antibacterial properties that professional kitchens have valued and relied on for decades of health inspections. Maintaining it is genuinely part of the appeal. Rather than a chore, regular mineral oil conditioning lets it develop a deep, rich patina over the years instead of just wearing thin and needing replacement. It's also one of the more affordable countertop materials available on the market today, which makes its near-total disappearance from mainstream new-build kitchens even harder to justify on cost grounds alone. 6. Pull-out breadboards. Tucked beneath the countertop in a thin, slide-out wooden panel, the pull-out breadboard gave cooks a dedicated, clean surface for kneading dough or rolling out pastry, then folded away flush with the cabinetry the moment it wasn't needed. In kitchens with genuinely limited counter space, it functioned as an entire second workstation that didn't cost a single square inch of permanent surface area. It's a detail that mostly survives now only in high-end custom cabinetry, largely forgotten everywhere else. But for anyone working in an apartment kitchen or a smaller renovation, it's one of the simplest and cheapest space-saving ideas on this entire list to bring back. 5. Kitchen command centers. Long before laptops took over the kitchen table entirely, many homes had a small built-in desk tucked into a corner nook, a dedicated spot for paying bills, updating the family calendar in pen, and copying out recipes by hand from a relative's card. It gave household logistics an actual physical home instead of letting bills and permission slips spread out across the counter next to dinner prep. That idea is resurfacing now, driven partly by the rise of working and schooling from home, but in a scaled-down form. A compact charging station, a small writing surface, or a mini home office nook, rather than a full desk with a bulky computer tower underneath it. The goal is the same as it always was, a clearly defined space for managing the household that doesn't quietly eat into the actual cooking area. 4. Milk doors. One of the most overlooked features from the era before home refrigeration was widespread. The milk door was a small insulated compartment built directly into an exterior wall, most common from the late 1800s through the 1950s. It had 2 latched doors, one facing outside for the milkman's early morning drop-off, one facing the kitchen or pantry for the household to collect from, with a small insulated cavity between them that kept dairy cool overnight and out of reach of curious pets or opportunistic thieves. A 1918 issue of House Beautiful magazine described the milk door as protecting deliveries from nosy animals as well as anyone passing by with sticky fingers. And typical compartments ran only about 5 inches deep, roughly 1.5 feet tall, and about 1 foot wide. It was, in effect, a secure delivery locker invented roughly a century before Amazon needed to build one of its own. And some builders today are reviving the concept as an insulated, code-compliant drop box for grocery and package deliveries, complete with smart locks and one-time delivery codes. 3. Farmhouse apron sinks. The deep, exposed front apron sink has roots going back to late 17th century Europe, with fire clay and cast iron versions becoming standard fixtures in American kitchens by the late 1800s, prized for handling the sheer volume of hand washing a household did before dishwashers existed. Its defining trait, the broad, deep basin, made it far better suited to washing oversized stock pots and roasting pans than the shallow, divided double sinks that eventually replaced it in most mid-century homes. The exposed front isn't purely decorative. Either it removes the sharp countertop edge that normally digs into your body during a long stretch of hand-washing dishes, which makes the entire task noticeably more comfortable on the back and hips. Original units in cast iron or fire clay were built to last for generations without cracking or staining, and that reputation for sheer toughness is exactly why the style has fully returned to modern renovations over the past few decades, now available in everything from copper to concrete. 2. Solid surface countertops. Long before quartz took over kitchen showrooms, DuPont introduced Corian in 1967, developed by chemist Donald Slocum as a non-porous alternative to marble and granite that wouldn't crack, stain, or etch the way natural stone can under acid or heat. For years afterward, it was treated as a slightly dated, budget-friendly choice. Overshadowed once granite and later quartz became the default aspirational material in showroom after showroom. That reputation has started to shift again. Newer formulations offer subtler colors and textures that mimic natural stone far more convincingly than the swirled patterns of the 1980s and 1990s. And the material's biggest practical advantage hasn't changed at all. In nearly 60 years, scratches, burns, and dings can simply be sanded and buffed out on site, extending the life of the counter indefinitely instead of forcing a full, expensive replacement. For busy households with kids and daily wear, that repairability alone is worth reconsidering before defaulting straight to quartz. 1. Butler's Pantries. And here's the feature that might make you want to start remodeling immediately. The butler's pantry was originally a buffer room positioned between the kitchen and the dining room, common in homes built for formal entertaining from the late 1800s through the 1950s. It gave household staff, or simply the host, a place to plate food, store fine china and serving pieces, and quietly stage an entire party completely out of guest sight. What makes it worth reviving isn't nostalgia for having servants. It's the very specific problem it solves for today's open floor plans. Anyone who's hosted a dinner in a kitchen that's fully visible from the living room knows the low-grade stress of dirty pans and crusted mixing bowls sitting in plain view for the entire evening. A butler's pantry, often equipped with its own small prep sink, lets you shove all of that mess out of sight the second you're done cooking, keeping the main kitchen looking presentable while guests are still at the table. It's quietly become one of the most requested additions in new luxury home builds for exactly that reason. Precisely because open-concept living solved one problem, isolation in the kitchen, while quietly creating another. Nowhere left to hide the mess. Bringing the butler's pantry back is really an admission that the previous generation had already solved a problem we only just rediscovered. So there you have it. 20 features our grandparents' generation figured out decades before we did, most of them quietly solving problems we're still complaining about in kitchens today. If you could only bring one of these back into your own home, which one would it be? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And I'm genuinely curious which era of kitchen design you'd want walking back through your own front door. And if this took you down memory lane, do us a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next trip back in time.